Oh, сколько лет, сколько зим. Still struggling, I see.
Nonsense. You're exactly who I was looking for. We have a meeting in the Hamptons next week.
The pee stain on my lapel wasn't just dirt. It was a map of my failures. I had scrubbed it with dish soap and desperation until the fabric frayed, but the green ghost remained, mocking my attempt to look like a man who hadn't lost everything. Tonight was the 10-year reunion, a battlefield I wasn't equipped to fight on, but fate has a cruel way of forcing your hand. If I had known that walking through those doors would shatter my remaining dignity, I would have burned the suit and stayed home. "You look handsome, Daddy," Leo chirped, his small voice the only pure thing in my dingy apartment. He clutched his worn-out teddy bear, unaware that his father was hyperventilating internally. I crouched down, my knees popping, and smoothed his unruly hair. "Thanks, buddy," I lied, forcing a smile that felt like cracked plaster. Mrs. Higgins, the elderly neighbor who babysat for rates I could barely afford, gave me a pitying look. She saw the fraying cuffs of my shirt and the dark circles etched under my eyes. "Don't worry about Leo," she said softly, taking his hand. "You go have a night for yourself, Mark. You've earned it." I hadn't earned a night out. I had earned a sentence of isolation, according to my bank account. The door clicked shut, and the silence of the one-bedroom apartment pressed against my chest like a physical weight. I checked my reflection in the hallway mirror, flinching at the man staring back. He looked 5 years older than 30, haunted by ghosts of a life that used to be his. My best friend Sam had been relentless, blowing up my phone for weeks until I finally agreed to attend. "Networking," he had insisted, "is the only way out of that junior draftsman role." I knew he was right, but the thought of begging for work from people who used to copy my homework made bile rise in my throat. I grabbed my keys, the metal cold against my sweating palm. The walk to the subway was a gauntlet of humid city air and exhaust fumes. I checked my watch, a digital relic from high school, and realized I was already running late. Being late meant making an entrance, and making an entrance was the last thing a man in a stained suit wanted to do. I prayed for a delay, a power outage, anything to keep me from reaching the Grand Oblivious Hotel. The subway car was crowded, smelling of stale coffee and too many badas. I caught my reflection in the dark window as we rattled through the tunnels. For a second, I saw the 18-year-old version of myself full of hope, voted most likely to succeed. That boy would have wept if he could see the 30-year-old man clinging to a subway pole. I remembered the day Vanessa left, a memory that played on a loop whenever I was alone. She hadn't screamed. She had just packed her Louis Vuitton bags with a terrifyingly calm efficiency. "I didn't sign up for coupons and a crying baby," she had said, stepping over Leo's playmat. The sound of her heels clicking down the hallway still echoed in my nightmares. Vanessa had wanted the high life, the penthouse, the galas. I had given her a draftsman's salary and a colicky infant. In her eyes, I wasn't just a husband who failed. I was a breach of contract. That was the narrative she spun to our friends, leaving me to pick up the pieces of a shattered life. The subway doors hissed open, spitting me out into the affluent district of the city. The air here even smelled different, like expensive cologne and ozone. I walked toward the hotel, the looming glass structure reflecting the city lights like a pillar of judgment. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The Grand Hotel's entrance was intimidating, flanked by doormen in uniforms that cost more than my entire wardrobe. A line of limousines idled at the curb, disgorging successful alumni in shimmering gowns and bespoke tuxedos. I hesitated at the edge of the red carpet, feeling like an intruder at my own funeral. I adjusted my lapel, trying to hide the stain with my hand. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of money and exhaust, and stepped onto the carpet. A valet looked past me, his eyes scanning for someone important, someone with keys to a Porsche. I kept my head down, focusing on the tips of my scuffed dress shoes. "Just 2 hours," I chanted internally. "Get a drink, say hello to Sam, and vanish?" The lobby was a cavern of marble and gold leaf, designed to make you feel small. A sign with elegant calligraphy pointed toward the class of 2014 reunion. Following the arrow felt like walking the plank. I smoothed my tie for the 100th time, wishing I could smooth out the last 5 years of my life just as easily. I reached the ballroom doors, and the sound of laughter and clinking glasses washed over me. It was the sound of success, of people who had figured it out. I pushed the heavy door open and slipped inside, immediately seeking the shadows. The room was dripping with crystals, a chandelier the size of a car hanging ominously overhead. I scanned the room for Sam, but the sea of faces was overwhelming. Everyone looked polished, filtered, as if they were walking Instagram posts. I felt the fabric of my suit itch, a constant reminder of its cheap synthetic blend. I moved toward the bar, hoping a glass of water would give me something to do with my hands. The bartender, a young man with a judgmental stare, looked me up and down. "Sparkling water," I ordered, my voice sounding thin in the cavernous room. He served it without a garnish, sensing I wasn't a big tipper. I took the glass and turned around, keeping my back to the wall, a defensive posture I had adopted since the divorce. Then I saw them. The golden circle, they occupied the center of the dance floor, a gravitational black hole of popularity. They were the ones who had peaked in high school and somehow managed to stay on top. They laughed louder than everyone else, their teeth white and predatory. And in the center of the circle was Vanessa. My breath hitched, a physical pain striking my chest. She was wearing a red dress that clung to her like a second skin, vibrant and aggressive. She looked radiant, untouched by the trauma that had aged me 10 years and 5. She was clutching the arm of a man I recognized, Brad, a hedge fund manager from the class above us. He was everything I wasn't: tall, wealthy, and wearing a suit that fit. Vanessa laughed at something he whispered, throwing her head back in a gesture I used to love. Now that laugh sounded like shattering glass. I needed to leave. The plan to stay for 2 hours evaporated instantly. I couldn't watch her play the part of the happy socialite while I stood there like a specter of her past. I placed my untouched water on a high-top table and turned toward the exit. My legs felt heavy, as if I were wading through mud. I kept my head low, praying for invisibility. I had almost made it to the perimeter of the room when a voice cut through the ambient noise. It was high-pitched, incredulous, and terrifyingly familiar. "Mark? Oh my God, is that Mark?" The voice acted like a command, silencing the conversations nearby. I froze, my hand hovering over the door handle. I closed my eyes for a split second, gathering the fragments of my courage. I turned slowly, dread coiling in my stomach. Vanessa was walking toward me, parting the crowd like a shark moving through a school of fish. The golden circle followed her, a phalanx of judgment. Her eyes locked onto mine, widening with a mix of amusement and disdain. "Vanessa," I said, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. "You look well," it was the polite, civilized thing to say. I hoped it would be enough to deflect her, to satisfy her curiosity so she would let me pass. She stopped a foot away, entering my personal space with zero hesitation. The scent of her expensive perfume Chanel No. 5 hit me, triggering a flood of memories I didn't want. She looked me up and down, her gaze traveling from my graying temples to my scuffed shoes. Her eyes stopped on my lapel. She squinted slightly, and then a slow, cruel smirk spread across her red lips. She had spotted the stain. The pea stain I had agonizingly tried to hide was now the spotlight of the evening. "And you look exactly the same," she announced, her voice pitched to carry to the onlookers. "Still wearing that charcoal suit from our honeymoon?" "God, Mark, that was 5 years ago." The crowd tittered, a nervous, sycophantic sound. My face burned. That suit was the only one I owned that was still intact. "It's a classic," I muttered, checking my watch again as if I had an appointment. "I was just leaving." I tried to step around her, but she sidestepped, blocking my path. "Leaving so soon?" She swirled her martini, the olive bobbing in the liquid. "But we haven't caught up." "Everyone, you remember Mark, right?" "My first husband." She said the word first with a sneer, implying there would be many, better versions after me. The golden circle closed in, trapping me in a semicircle of mockery. "Brad," the hedge fund manager, looked at me with bored amusement. "The architect, right?" he asked, though he clearly didn't care. "Draftsman," Vanessa corrected him quickly. "Junior draftsman." "Still drawing lines for other people's dreams?" Vanessa asked, her tone dripping with faux sweetness. It was a direct quote from an argument we'd had years ago, weaponized for a public audience. She knew exactly where to twist the knife. "I enjoy my work," I said stiffly. I thought of the late nights, the intricate designs I created that my boss, Henderson, took credit for. I thought of the meager paycheck that barely covered rent and daycare. I didn't enjoy it. I survived it. And you have custody of the kid, right? She continued, pivoting the conversation to the one topic that could break me. She turned to her friends, her face arranging itself into a mask of tragic sympathy. He's a single dad, full-time. It's actually tragic. He lives in that tiny complex on 4th Street, she whispered loudly, as if sharing a scandalous secret. You know, the one near the highway overpass, the one with the sirens all night? The crowd murmured, their eyes filled with pity that felt like acid. Vanessa, that's enough, I said, my voice dropping an octave. I could handle insults about my suit or my job, but I wouldn't let her drag our home through the mud. It was a small home, but it was safe, and it was filled with love. She laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. Why are you getting defensive? I'm just praising you, she said, her eyes glinting with malice. It takes a lot of courage to show up here looking like a charity case. Most men would be too ashamed. I mean, look at you, she gestured with her glass, spilling a drop of martini on the floor. You look exhausted. Do you even have a savings account, Mark, or is it all going to? What's his name again? The baby? The air left my lungs. She didn't remember his name, her own son. The boy she had abandoned in a crib 3 years ago. The cruelty of it was so profound it left me momentarily stunned. His name is Leo, I snapped, my hands balling into fists at my sides. The anger finally broke through the shame. And he's happy. He's a happy, brilliant little boy. He's anchored to a sinking ship, she shot back, her mask slipping to reveal the bitterness underneath. I did the smart thing getting out. I chose a future. You chose to play house in poverty. The music seemed to fade away as the tension in our circle sucked the energy from the room. People from other tables were standing up to watch. I was the entertainment, the train wreck. Look at you, Mark, she hissed, stepping closer so only I could see the veins in her eyes. You're a nobody. You were a nobody in high school, a nobody when we were married, and you're a nobody now. You're just a tired little man in a stained suit, she finished, pointing a manicured finger at the pea stain. It felt like she was pointing a gun. The verdict was delivered. Guilty of failure. A few people laughed. Brad chuckled, shaking his head. I looked around the circle of faces, people I had shared lockers with, people I had studied with. None of them stepped in. They watched with morbid curiosity. I felt the heat rise up my neck, scorching my skin. It wasn't just embarrassment, it was a profound sense of injustice. I had stayed, I had done the work, I had raised the child. Why was I the one being punished? I wanted to scream at her. I wanted to tell her about the nights Leo cried for her and how I had to lie and say mommy was working. I wanted to tell her about the sacrifices I made daily just to keep the lights on. But I knew that any reaction would be used against me. If I yelled, I was the crazy ex. If I cried, I was the weakling. I was trapped in a game I couldn't win. My throat felt tight, constricted by the lump of unsaid words. I looked at the exit, so close yet miles away. I just wanted to go home to Leo. I wanted to hug my son and forget these people existed. Nothing to say? Vanessa goaded, tilting her head. Cat got your tongue? Or maybe you're just waiting for someone to tell you what to do, like a good little draftsman. I took a deep breath, preparing to swallow my pride and walk away. I would be the bigger man even if it meant looking like the smaller one. I opened my mouth to offer a quiet goodbye. The silence in the room was heavy, thick with anticipation. They were waiting for me to break. They wanted the tear, the outburst. They wanted a show. I looked at Vanessa one last time. Beneath the makeup and the jewels, I saw something else, insecurity. She needed to crush me to validate her own choices. If I was miserable, then leaving was right. I feel sorry for you, Vanessa, I said softly. It wasn't the retort she expected. Her eyes narrowed. Excuse me? You have everything, I gestured to her dress, her boyfriend, the ballroom. But you don't remember your son's name. That's not success. That's just sad. For a second she looked struck, but then the anger returned, hotter than before. She opened her mouth to eviscerate me, to deliver a blow from which I couldn't recover, but she never got the chance. A sound echoed from the main entrance. It wasn't a normal sound. It was the heavy, authoritative thud of the double mahogany doors being thrown open with immense force. The noise was loud enough to stop the music. It was loud enough to make the bartenders stop pouring. It commanded instant, total silence. The air pressure in the room seemed to drop. A strange energy swept through the hall, a static charge that made the hair on my arms stand up. Every head turned toward the doors. The gossip stopped. The laughter died. Even Vanessa looked over her shoulder, her insult forgotten in the sudden shift of atmosphere. 2 security guards in black suits stepped through first, scanning the room with professional intensity. They weren't hotel security. They were private detail, serious, dangerous. Then a figure stepped into the light. A silhouette framed by the hallway lights. Even in the shadows, the posture was unmistakable. It was a woman, tall, imposing. She wore a tuxedo, not a gown, a choice that screamed power rather than conformity. She didn't walk. She glided. Her heels struck the marble with a rhythmic precision that sounded like a ticking clock. Click, click. The crowd parted instinctively. It was the Red Sea parting for Moses. No one knew who she was yet, but they knew she was important. I squinted, my heart skipping a beat. I knew that walk. I knew that severe bun. I knew the terrifying aura of competence that surrounded her. Vanessa whispered to Brad, "Who is that?" Her voice trembled slightly. She sensed a predator had entered the tank. The woman walked past the student council president without a glance. She walked past the prom queen as if she were furniture. Her eyes were locked on a singular target. She was looking at me, Mark, the junior draftsman. The man with the pee stain. It was Elena Vance, the billionaire. My boss, and she looked like she was ready to burn the world down. The silence that followed the crashing open of the double mahogany doors was not merely an absence of noise. It was a physical weight, heavy and sudden, as if the air pressure in the Grand Hotel's ballroom had dropped instantly. The DJ killed the fader on the generic pop track. The clinking of crystal flutes ceased. Even the ambient hum of 300 conversations was extinguished in a heartbeat. I stood there, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, the heat of Vanessa's humiliation still burning my cheeks. But the burning stopped, replaced by a cold, confusing dread. The entire room had turned toward the entrance. 2 men in dark suits stepped through first. They weren't hotel security. Their posture was too rigid, their scanning of the room too predatory. They moved with the efficiency of Secret Service agents clearing a visual path. And then she appeared. Elena Vance. To call her my boss was an understatement that bordered on insult. She was an institution. She was the architect who had redesigned half the city's skyline before she turned 35. She was a billionaire recluse who lived in the penthouse of the Spire, the very building I worked in, and she was a ghost. In 3 years as a junior draftsman, I had seen her in the flesh twice. Both times I had been too terrified to speak. Tonight she wasn't a ghost. She was a force of nature. She wore a tuxedo black silk lapels, tailored to a devastating precision that made the ballroom gowns around her look like cheap costumes. She wore no jewelry save for a thin platinum watch on her wrist. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe, elegant bun that highlighted the sharp, aristocratic lines of her jaw. She didn't just walk into the room, she annexed it. Vanessa, sensing the shift in the room's energy, looked over her shoulder. The sneer on her face faltered, replaced by a flicker of genuine confusion. "Who is that?" she whispered to Brad. Brad, the arrogant hedge fund manager who had been laughing at my poverty seconds ago, had gone pale. He recognized the power dynamics instantly. "That's Elena Vance," he hissed, his voice trembling. "Vance & Co. She owns." "Well, she owns everything." Elena began to move. She descended the small staircase into the ballroom pit, her stilettos clicking against the marble with a rhythmic military precision. Click, click, click. The sound echoed in the silent room. The crowd parted for her like the Red Sea. It was a fascinating, terrifying display of instinctive submission. The prom queen of 2014 stepped back so quickly she nearly tripped. The captain of the football team, now a car salesman, lowered his gaze as she passed. Elena didn't look at them. She didn't acknowledge the whispers or the stares. Her gray eyes were locked on a singular point in the distance, me. My stomach dropped. Panic, cold and sharp, flooded my system. Why is she here? The question raced through my mind. Had I made a catastrophic error on the blueprints I submitted this morning? Had I accidentally deleted a server? Was she here to fire me in person to complete the public execution that Vanessa had started? It felt like a nightmare. First my ex-wife destroys my past, and now my boss was coming to destroy my future. Elena walked straight through the golden circle. She didn't walk around them. She walked through them, forcing them to scatter. She stopped exactly 2 feet from me, entering the circle of humiliation Vanessa had drawn around us. Up close, she was even more intimidating. She was taller than Vanessa, taller than me in those heels. She radiated a scent of rainfall and expensive parchment. She looked at Vanessa for a split second, a gaze so devoid of warmth it could have frozen helium, before dismissing her entirely as if she were a piece of uninteresting furniture. Then she turned her eyes to me. I braced myself for the termination. I braced myself for her to ask why I was wearing a stained suit or why I looked like a wreck. Instead, her face changed. The icy mask didn't crack. It melted, her eyes softened, crinkling slightly at the corners. Her shoulders dropped a fraction of an inch. It was a look of relief, familiarity. "Mark," she said. Her voice was a rich alto, calm and commanding, carrying effortlessly to the back of the silent room. It wasn't the voice of a boss addressing a subordinate. It was the voice of a partner addressing an equal. "I'm sorry to crash your party," she continued, stepping closer, invading my personal space in a way that felt strangely protective. "You weren't answering your phone?" My hands were shaking. I hid them behind my back. "Miss Vance?" I stammered, my voice cracking. I have it on silent. I didn't want to be rude. "Is everything okay? Is it the file?" Elena smiled. It was a dazzling, genuine smile that I had never seen in the office. It transformed her face, making her look younger, softer. She reached out, her hand moving toward my chest. I froze, not breathing. Her cool fingers brushed against my neck as she adjusted my tie, straightening the knot with a deliberate, intimate care. The room gasped collectively. This was the billionaire ice queen, touching a junior draftsman in a cheap suit. "Everything is better than okay," she said, her eyes searching mine, silently telling me to play along. "But we have a crisis with the Tokyo Skyline project. The Japanese investors are threatening to pull out. They're frantic. They said they won't sign the final contract unless the lead architect walks them through the structural revisions tonight. They're on the jet, waiting on the tarmac." I blinked, my brain struggling to catch up. The Tokyo project? "But Miss Vance, I'm just a junior draftsman. Mr. Henderson is the lead architect." "You need Henderson." Elena laughed softly. It was a low, melodic sound that made the men nearby lean in, mesmerized. She smoothed the lapel of my jacket right over the pea stain as if it were made of Italian silk. "Mark, don't be modest." "It doesn't suit you," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial level that the whole circle still strained to hear. "Henderson was fired 3 hours ago. Security escorted him out. My jaw actually dropped." "What?" "He was a hack," Elena said, her tone hardening slightly as she mentioned him. "I've been reviewing the logs, Mark. I saw the timestamps. I saw who was actually doing the work at 2 a.m. while Henderson was at the country club. I saw the revisions to the atrium designs, the ones Henderson claimed were his. That was your signature style? The cantilevered glass? The biomimetic supports? That was all you." I stood stunned. She had noticed. For 3 years, I thought I was invisible, just a cog in the machine, grinding myself to dust to make a superior look good. But she had been watching. I didn't think you knew," I whispered. "It's my job to know," she replied firmly. Then she turned slightly, addressing the room at large, though her eyes stayed on me. "I'm promoting you, Mark, effective immediately. You are the senior partner of design at Vance & Co. You will be taking over the Tokyo account and the London account." The silence in the room was shattered by a sudden intake of breath from 50 different people. "Senior partner?" someone whispered. "That's a 7-figure job," someone else muttered. Elena wasn't done. "Your salary has been tripled, retroactive to the start of the fiscal year. And frankly, we need to get you closer to the office. The commute from 4th Street is wasting valuable billing hours. You'll have full access to the company penthouse for you and your... what was it? You have a son?" Tears pricked the corners of my eyes. I fought them back. Leo, I choked out. His name is Leo. Right, Leo, she said, her voice turning gentle. The penthouse has a nursery. My interior designers are already stocking it with toys. We need to make sure he's comfortable if you're going to be saving the company. She finally broke eye contact with me and turned slowly to face Vanessa. Vanessa looked like she had been slapped. Her mouth was hanging open, her skin the color of ash. She was gripping her martini glass so hard I thought the stem would snap. Brad, the hedge fund boyfriend, had actually taken a full step away from her, physically distancing himself from the wreckage. Elena looked Vanessa up and down, mimicking the exact inspection Vanessa had given me moments earlier. But where Vanessa's look had been one of petty judgment, Elena's was one of clinical dissection. I'm sorry, Elena said, her voice dripping with polite ice. I didn't catch your name. Are you an acquaintance of my partner? Vanessa stuttered. Her confidence had evaporated, leaving behind a small, frightened woman. I'm his wife. Ex-wife, I corrected. The words came out of me automatically. I stood up straighter, my spine fusing into steel. I looked at Vanessa, and for the first time in 5 years, I didn't feel lesser. I didn't feel like the failure. Elena arched an eyebrow. The ex-wife, she said, savoring the syllables. I recall the HR paperwork now. You're the one who left. You didn't think Mark had enough ambition? Was that the word? Vanessa turned beet red. She stammered, looking for an exit, looking for an ally. But the golden circle had abandoned her. They were staring at Elena with hero worship. We had differences regarding our futures, Vanessa managed to squeak out. Clearly, Elena said. She took a step closer to Vanessa, towering over her. Well, I suppose I should thank you. You did Mark a favor. If you hadn't left, he might have been distracted by someone who measures a man's worth by the label on his suit, rather than the talent in his mind. Elena let the silence hang there, letting the insult sink deep into Vanessa's psyche. Mark is going to reshape the skyline of this city, Elena declared, her voice ringing with finality. He is a visionary. And frankly, he deserves someone who sees his worth, not just his wallet. She turned back to me and the hardness vanished instantly. She slid her arm through mine, her grip warm and solid. It was a possessive gesture, a public declaration of alignment. The car is waiting, Mark, she said softly. We have champagne on ice and a helicopter waiting at the airfield to take us to the jet. The investors are eager to meet the real genius behind the curtain. She paused, tilting her head toward the exit. Unless you'd rather stay? I'm sure you have a lot of catching up to do with these people. I looked around the room. I saw Sam, my best friend, grinning like a maniac from the shadows, giving me a double thumbs up. I saw the high school principal looking at me with newfound respect. I saw the golden circle looking at me with naked envy, and I saw Vanessa. She looked small. She looked bitter. She looked like a memory that was rapidly fading. The pea stain on my lapel didn't matter anymore. The scuffed shoes didn't matter. I looked down at the woman holding my arm. She was saving me, yes, but she was also offering me a lifeline back to myself. No, I said, my voice strong. I have nothing left to do here. I'm ready to go. Good answer, Elena said, her eyes sparkling with a hint of mischief. She steered me toward the exit. We walked together, arm in arm, moving at her pace. The crowd parted again, but this time the energy was different. It wasn't just fear. It was awe. As we walked away, leaving Vanessa standing alone in the middle of the dance floor, the whispers started up again, swirling like leaves in our wake. Did you hear that? Senior partner, the Tokyo project? That's billions. Did you see how she touched his tie? Vanessa really blew it. She blew it big time. We reached the double doors. The security guards held them open for us. I stepped across the threshold, leaving the stale air of the ballroom for the cool, fresh air of the lobby. I didn't look back. Not once. We walked through the opulent lobby, past the gaping valet, and out into the night. A sleek, black stretch limousine was idling at the curb, longer and more expensive than anything else in the driveway. A driver in a cap held the rear door open. After you, partner, Elena said. I slid into the leather interior, the smell of premium leather and chilled champagne hitting me. Elena slid in next to me, and the heavy door thudded shut, sealing us in a cocoon of silence and safety. The car began to move, pulling away from the Grand Hotel, pulling away from the class of 2014, pulling away from the shame. I sat back, the adrenaline beginning to fade, replaced by a trembling exhaustion. I looked at Elena. She had kicked off her heels and was leaning back against the seat, her eyes closed, the formidable CEO mask slipping just enough to reveal a tired, human woman. I cleared my throat. The performance was over. Now I needed the truth. Ms. Vance, I started. She opened one eye. Elena, please, Mark, after that performance, I think we're on a first-name basis. Elena, I corrected myself. Thank you. I don't know what to say. You saved my life back there. But be honest with me, was that real? Or did you just do that because you saw I was drowning? I held my breath, waiting for her to tell me it was all a charade, a cruel mercy to get me out of a bad situation. I waited for her to tell me I was still just a junior draftsman. Elena sat up. She reached for the bottle of crystal in the ice bucket and popped the cork with practiced ease. She poured 2 flutes, the bubbles rising furiously in the golden liquid. She handed me one, her fingers brushing mine again. Mark, she said, her expression serious. I don't play games with my company. And I certainly don't lie about talent. She took a sip, watching me over the rim of her glass. Henderson really is fired, she said. He was a liability. And I really have been watching you. You're the most talented architect in the building, Mark. You have an eye for structure that I haven't seen since. Well, since I started. You're the only one who cares about the work more than the politics. She leaned forward, her gray eyes locking onto mine. The promotion is real. The raise is real. The Tokyo project is yours. I felt the air rush into my lungs. I won't let you down. I know you won't, she said softly. Then she looked down at her glass, a faint, rare blush coloring her cheeks. But to answer your other question, I didn't have to come here personally. I could have sent a lawyer. I could have sent an email. Why did you? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She looked up, and for the first time, I saw vulnerability in the eyes of the billionaire. Because when I heard you were coming to this reunion, I knew what high school people are like. I knew she would be here. And I knew what she would try to do to you. She paused, swirling the champagne. I have a son too, Mark. His name is Julian. He's with his nanny tonight. Being a single parent in this city, it's a war. I've seen you leave the office early to pick up Leo, looking terrified that you'd be judged. And I've seen you log back in at 10 p.m. to finish your work, exhausted but determined. I stared at her, the ice queen. Was a mom? A single mom? I had no idea, I whispered. I keep my private life guarded, she said. Weakness is blood in the water in my world, but tonight, I saw a good man about to be torn apart by wolves. And I wanted to make sure the good guy won for once. She smiled, a small, private smile just for me. And maybe, she added, her voice dropping to a murmur, I wanted an excuse to finally have a drink with you. Without the drafting table between us, I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had just rewritten my destiny, not because of pity, but because of respect. She saw the stain on my suit, yes, but she also saw the man beneath it. I raised my glass, my hand steady for the first time all night. To the Tokyo project, I said. Elena clinked her glass against mine, the crystal singing a clear, pure note. To the Tokyo project, she agreed. And to Leo, as the limo sped toward the airfield, the city lights blurring past us like streaks of gold. I realized I wasn't just Mark the single dad or Mark the draftsman anymore. I was Mark, the senior partner. And as I looked at Elena and she looked back at me, I had a feeling this was just the first chapter of a much longer story. The heavy thud of the limousine door sealing shut didn't just block out the noise of the city. It severed the connection to my past life. The leather seat was cool against my back, a stark contrast to the burning humiliation I had felt only minutes prior. As the car pulled away from the curb, gliding effortlessly into the stream of traffic, I watched the entrance of the Grand Hotel recede into the distance. Vanessa, the golden circle, the pitying stares, they all shrank until they were nothing more than specks of light in the rearview mirror. I let out a breath that shuddered through my entire frame. My hands, resting on my knees, were still trembling slightly. Elena Vance kicked off her stilettos. She didn't do it delicately. She did it with the exhausted grunt of a woman who had been on her feet since dawn. She leaned back into the plush corner of the cabin, closing her eyes for a moment. Without the eyes of the public on her, the armor of the billionaire CEO slipped, revealing a human being who was simply tired. "There is water in the console," she murmured without opening her eyes. "And whiskey." "Use the whiskey." I reached for the crystal decanter, my hand hovering. "Miss Vance." "Elena, I need to ask you something before we go any further." She opened one eye, the gray iris catching the passing streetlights. "If you're going to ask if you're dreaming, Mark, don't. It's a cliché, and I don't hire clichés." "Not that," I said, finally pouring a measure of amber liquid into a glass. "I didn't drink it, I just held it, needing the weight." "The Tokyo project, the investors, is that real? Or was that just a prop to get me out of there?" Elena sat up, shifting instantly from exhausted to intense. She took the glass from my hand, took a sip, and handed it back. "Mark, I possess a net worth of $4 billion. I can buy a hotel to get someone out of a bad date. I don't need to invent a corporate crisis." She gestured to a tablet resting on the seat between us. "The crisis is real. The Matsuda Group is furious. Henderson tried to cut costs on the seismic dampers for the Tokyo Tower. He thought they wouldn't notice." "They noticed?" My stomach dropped. "He compromised the structural integrity?" "He compromised my reputation," Elena corrected, her voice sharpening. "But yes, the physics were optimistic at best, dangerous at worst. I fired him at 4 p.m. I was going to call you in, but HR said you had taken a personal night for a reunion. When I looked at the blueprints, your blueprints, the ones Henderson tried to bury, I realized you were the only one who understood the load-bearing distribution for that specific design." She looked at me, her expression softening. "I didn't go to that reunion to save a charity case, Mark. I went to retrieve my lead architect. The fact that I got to humiliate your ex-wife was just a signing bonus." A laugh bubbled up in my chest, a genuine, incredulous laugh. "You have a terrifying definition of a bonus." "I'm a terrifying woman," she said with a smirk. "Now, drink." We're 5 minutes from the airfield. The helicopter is waiting. The transition was a blur of efficiency. The limo bypassed the commercial terminals of the airport and drove straight onto the tarmac. The whine of a turbine engine drowned out the night. A sleek black helicopter sat waiting, its rotors slowly turning, cutting the humid air. As we boarded, the wind whipping my tie and the pea stain I had forgotten about, I felt a surge of vertigo. Not from the height, but from the speed of the ascent. 3 hours ago, I was worried about the price of a slider. Now, I was strapping into a corporate helicopter next to the most powerful woman in architecture. We lifted off, the city of lights tilting beneath us. I looked down at the grid of streets. Somewhere down there, in the dark patches between the bright avenues, was my apartment on 4th Street. Somewhere down there, Mrs. Higgins was watching TV, and Leo was sleeping in his crib with the wobbly leg. "We'll send a car for Mrs. Higgins and Leo," Elena said, her voice coming through the headset clearly, reading my mind. "My nanny, quiet a woman named Sophie, is already at the penthouse preparing the nursery. She's excellent. She speaks 4 languages and makes organic baby food from scratch. Leo will be fine." I looked at her, stunned. "You arranged a nanny? When?" "While you were getting your coat," she said simply. "I'm a mother, Mark. I know you can focus on structural integrity if you worried about your son." The helicopter banked, heading toward a private hangar where a Gulfstream jet waited, its engines idling with a high-pitched scream. "The Matsuda reps are on the jet," Elena explained as we began our descent. "They wouldn't come to the office. They felt insulted. We are going to them. You have 20 minutes to review the revised specs before we walk in there." She handed me the tablet. For the next 10 minutes, the luxury, the reunion, and Vanessa didn't exist. I was in my element. I scrolled through the CAD drawings, my eyes scanning the math. I saw exactly where Henderson had messed up. He had used a static load model for a dynamic environment. It was amateur hour. "I see it," I muttered, my finger tracing the line of the atrium. He didn't account for the wind shear at the 40th story. "If we use a diagrid system here and counterweight the damper by 4%. Exactly, Elena said. She was watching me, not the screen. You speak the language, Mark. Now go tell them. The interior of the jet was more like a flying boardroom than an aircraft. 3 Japanese men in impeccable suits sat around a mahogany table. They looked stone-faced, their arms crossed, radiating skepticism. When we boarded, they stood up out of politeness, but the tension was thick enough to choke on. Elena stepped forward. Gentlemen, thank you for waiting. This is Mark Disable. He is the new senior partner, and the true mind behind the Atrium concept you loved in the initial proposal. The lead investor, Mr. Matsuda, looked at me. He looked at my off-the-rack suit. He looked at the faint pea stain on my lapel. He looked at my scuffed shoes. I saw the judgment in his eyes. It was the same look Vanessa had given me. This is the man. But this time, I didn't shrink. I didn't apologize. I had the math. I had the truth. I walked to the table, placed the tablet down, and connected it to the main screen. Mr. Matsuda, I said, my voice steady. Mr. Henderson was focused on the aesthetics of the spire. He was wrong. The beauty of this building isn't in the glass. It's in the bones. I pulled up the wireframe model. If we build it his way, the sway during a typhoon would crack the glazing within 5 years. But, I swiped to my revision, if we integrate the support into the aesthetic like this, I worked for an hour. I drew, I explained, I argued physics, I forgot about my suit. I forgot about the billions of dollars at stake. I was just an architect building a castle in the sky. Slowly, the crossed arms uncrossed. Mr. Matsuda leaned in. He started asking questions, technical, difficult questions. I answered every one of them. Finally, silence fell over the cabin. Mr. Matsuda looked at the screen, then at Elena, and finally at me. The bones, Matsuda repeated. He looked at me with a newfound respect. You care about the safety of the people inside, yes? More than the cost of the steel? I live in a building that shakes when trucks go by, I said honestly. I know what it feels like to be unsafe. I won't build a tower that makes anyone feel that way. Matsuda smiled. It was a small, rare thing. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a fountain pen, and signed the document on the table. We proceed, Matsuda said. With Mr. Disable as lead? Elena let out a breath she had been holding. She caught my eye and gave me a barely perceptible nod. You did it. It was 2 a.m. when we finally arrived at the Vance building. The crisis was averted. The contract was signed. The jet had taxied back, and a car had whisked us to the skyscraper that dominated the city skyline, the building where I used to work in a cubicle on the 14th floor. The private elevator whisked us up to the penthouse, passing the 14th floor in a blur of motion. My ears popped as we hit the 90th floor. The doors opened into a living space that was larger than my entire apartment complex. Floor-to-ceiling glass revealed the city spread out like a glittering circuit board below. It was breathtaking but silent. Sophie, Elena called out softly. A stout, kind-faced woman appeared from a hallway. They are asleep, Miss Vance, in the West Wing. They? I asked. Come, Elena whispered. She led me down a hallway lined with modern art. She pushed open a door. Inside, bathed in the soft glow of a nightlight, were 2 cribs. In one, my son, Leo, was fast asleep, his thumb in his mouth, his worn-out teddy bear tucked under his chin. He looked peaceful, clean, and safe. In the other crib was a boy about the same age with dark hair like Elena's, Julian. I stood there, leaning against the doorframe, and felt the adrenaline of the night finally crash. The tears I had held back at the reunion, in the limo, and on the jet finally spilled over. I wiped them away quickly, ashamed. Don't, Elena said softly. She was standing right beside me, looking at the children. She wasn't looking at me with pity. She was looking at the boys with a profound, aching love. I cry in the bathroom at least once a week. It's part of the job description. He looks so small in this big room, I whispered. He looks safe, she countered. Mark, the apartment on 4th Street. I know you tried. I know you did your best. But you don't have to fight the war alone anymore. She turned to me. In the dim light of the nursery, the terrifying CEO was gone. She was just a woman in a tuxedo with messy hair and tired eyes. There is a guest suite next door, she said. It's yours for as long as you need. The commute from here to your new office is exactly 1 elevator ride. You can have breakfast with Leo every morning. I looked at her. Why? Why go this far? The promotion I understand, the work I understand, but this? Elena looked down at her hands. Because when I saw Vanessa tearing you down, I saw every person who ever told me I could unrun this company because I was a woman or because I was a single mother. She wasn't just attacking you, Mark. She was attacking the idea that people like us, people who struggle, people who care, can win. She looked up, her eyes fierce again. And I really hate losing, I smiled. It was a tired, broken, happy smile. Thank you. Go to sleep, partner, she said. We have a skyline to build in the morning. I woke up to the smell of coffee and sunshine. For a moment, I panicked, not recognizing the high thread count sheets or the silence. No sirens, no trucks. Then the memories of the night flooded back. The reunion, the helicopter, the jet, the contract. I threw on the robe hanging on the door and rushed out. In the massive sun-drenched kitchen, chaos was unfolding, but it was a good kind of chaos. Leo was sitting in a high chair, his face covered in something green avocado, this time not peas. He was banging a spoon on the tray, giggling. Next to him, Julian was doing the same. And standing at the kitchen island, wearing a silk robe and holding a tablet in one hand and a spoon in the other, was Elena. She looked up as I entered. She looked rested, younger. Dada, Leo shrieked, waving the spoon. A glob of avocado flew through the air and landed with perfect comedic timing on Elena's silk lapel. I froze. Oh God, Elena, I'm so sorry. I'll get a towel. Elena looked down at the green stain. She touched it with her finger, then looked at me. For a second, I expected the CEO. I expected the anger. Instead, she started to laugh. It was a bright, unburdened sound that filled the room. It matches the one on your suit, she said, wiping it casually. Consider it the uniform of the new management. She walked over to the coffee machine and poured a mug. She handed it to me. I checked your phone, she said casually. It was buzzing on the counter. My heart tightened. Vanessa? 17 missed calls, Elena said. And a text message asking if we're hiring. I stared at her. What did you do? I didn't do anything, Elena smiled, taking a sip of her coffee. But you are going to block the number. And then you are going to sit down, eat these eggs, and help me figure out how to integrate a playground into the design of the Tokyo atrium. I took the coffee. I looked at Leo, covered in green mush and happier than I'd ever seen him. I looked at the view of the city, a city that no longer felt like a prison, but like a canvas. And finally, I looked at the stain on my lapel, the one I had been so ashamed of the night before. I realized Elena was right. It wasn't a mark of failure. It was a badge of honor. It meant I was a dad. A playground in the atrium, I mused, taking a seat at the island next to the billionaire who had saved my life. We'll need reinforced safety glass. And maybe a slide, Elena grinned, grabbing a napkin to wipe Leo's face. Now you're thinking like a senior partner. I took a sip of the coffee. It was the best cup I'd ever tasted.